Finding a night job that paid decently and didn't involve flipping burgers felt like a minor miracle. Especially one that advertised minimal human interaction. As an introvert saving up for grad school, that sounded like heaven. So, when I landed the gig as the sole overnight operator at the County Central Library's new automated sorting hub, I thought I'd lucked out. My name's Sarah. Turns out, minimal human interaction was an understatement, and luck had nothing to do with it. The hub wasn't attached to any library branch. It was a massive, windowless, beige cube of a building squatting on a patch of semi-industrial wasteland out by the old railyard, miles from the nearest residential area. Inside, it was less library adjacent and more Amazon warehouse meets sci-fi nightmare. Towering racks of empty shelves stretched up into the dim, sodium lamplit heights. A complex network of conveyor belts snaked throughout the facility, carrying plastic bins filled with returned library books. Robotic arms whirred and pivoted, scanning barcodes, grabbing books, and placing them into designated sorting chutes with unnerving precision. The constant, overlapping symphony of whirring motors, clattering belts, and pneumatic hisses was almost deafening, yet somehow managed to feel eerily empty. My job, according to the daytime supervisor Mr. Henderson, a perpetually flustered man who seemed terrified of the machinery, was simple. Sit in the small, glass-walled control booth overlooking the main sorting floor. Monitor the system via a bank of screens. Handle any jams or error codes, which usually just meant hitting a reset button or, rarely, donning a hard hat and safety vest to manually unstick a stubborn book from a conveyor. Shift was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Mostly, he'd assured me, I'd just be reading or studying. The system practically runs itself, he'd said, avoiding eye contact with the robotic arm nearest us. Hardly ever glitches. The last guy, well, he just found something else. Left kinda suddenly. My first night, the sheer scale and noise of the place were overwhelming. Sitting in the elevated control booth felt like being the lone zookeeper in a vast, automated jungle. Books flowed endlessly on the belts below, novels, textbooks, kids' picture books, DVDs, all heading towards their designated chutes and bins, sorted by Dewey Decimal, genre, or return branch. It was hypnotic, almost. Taped to the main monitor, I found a laminated sheet of paper. It wasn't official library stationery. The title was handwritten, stark and blocky, Things to Know, Night Shift. Sorting Hub Night Protocols. Keep the main overhead lights on at all times. If Sector DS lights go out, the far back corner, shelving units 80 to 99, do not go back there to investigate. Report it in the morning log. Avoid that sector until daylight. If the system sorts a book with no barcode, or a barcode that registers as INVALID_ENTRY_VOID, leave it in its bin. Do not remove it for manual processing. It will eventually be rerouted by the system. Do not attempt to read it. Between 3 a.m. and 3:15 a.m., the main sorting conveyor, belt alpha, will stop automatically. This is normal. Do not attempt to restart it manually. It will resume on its own after exactly 15 minutes. Stay in the control booth during this time. Ignore any sounds resembling whispering coming from the empty return chutes. It's an acoustic anomaly caused by the ventilation system. If a large number of children's picture books, 50 plus, are suddenly routed to the oversized manual review bin Mr. E01, for no apparent reason, lock the control booth door and do not leave it until 6 a.m. Do not look directly at the bin via the monitors if possible. The emergency phone in the booth calls 911 and Mr. Henderson. If you receive an incoming call on it, it should not be able to. Do not answer. Unplug the phone line from the wall immediately. I read the list, then read it again, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. Whispering vents. Barcodeless books. Spontaneous children's book floods. An emergency phone that rings when it shouldn't. And Sector DS lights. This wasn't about machine maintenance. This felt like Kevin's rules from the gas station or Elias's from the archive, warnings disguised as operational quirks. The previous operator had left suddenly. Why? What had happened here? I looked out through the glass walls of the control booth at the vast, noisy, yet utterly deserted facility. Robotic arms moved with relentless precision. Conveyor belts carried their silent cargo through the sodium lamp haze. It felt less like a library sorting center and more like a machine processing ghosts. I checked the clock, 11:45 p.m. My shift had barely begun, and already, the isolation felt less like a perk and more like a vulnerability. I made sure the control booth door was locked. Just in case. The first few hours of the shift were a strange mix of sensory overload and profound isolation. The constant clatter of plastic bins on metal rollers, the whir of robotic arms, the hiss of pneumatic actuators, it all blended into a monotonous, industrial drone that paradoxically emphasized the complete lack of human presence. I sat in the glass booth, elevated above the main floor, watching the relentless, automated flow of books like a lonely god observing a mechanical universe. Thousands of items passed below me, scanned, identified, and shunted down various chutes towards designated bins, all without a single human hand touching them. Mr. Henderson was right, the system did practically run itself. I tried to study, but the constant noise and the flickering sodium lights made concentration difficult. Mostly, I found myself watching the monitors, tracking the progress of bins, noting the efficiency of the robotic arms, trying to understand the logic of the complex conveyor network. And, admittedly, keeping a wary eye on the bank of monitors displaying Sector D, the far back corner, units 80 to 99. So far, the lights back there remained stubbornly, normally on. Around 1:30 a.m., an alert flashed on my main console screen, manual review required, bin Mr. E01. Bin Mr. E01 was the large rolling cart designated for oversized items, damaged books, or anything the scanners couldn't automatically process. Usually, it accumulated maybe a dozen items over a whole night shift. I checked the corresponding camera feed. A single, medium-sized, hardback book had just been dropped into the bin by one of the sorting arms. Nothing seemed unusual about it. Curious, I zoomed in the camera feed. The book had a plain, dark green cover, no title visible on the spine or front. That was odd, but not unheard of. Sometimes dust jackets went missing. I accessed the item log for the sorting arm. The entry read, timestamp 1 hour 32 minutes and 14 seconds. Item ID, null. Barcode scan, invalid_entry_void. Route, Mr. E01. Rule 2. If the system sorts a book with no barcode, or a barcode that registers as our invalid_entry_void, leave it in its bin. Do not remove it for manual processing. It will eventually be rerouted by the system. Do not attempt to read it. Invalid_entry_void. My stomach gave a slight lurch. Just a glitch, I told myself. A damaged barcode the scanner couldn't read. Happens all the time. But the rule was specific. Leave it. Do not read it. I watched the book sitting alone in the large bin on the monitor. The plain green cover seemed almost deliberately anonymous. What kind of book had no barcode, no title, nothing? An old one, maybe, predating the system? But libraries usually retrofitted old books with new barcodes. A test item? Possibly. But why the specific, ominous rule? It will eventually be rerouted. How? Would an arm come and pick it up later? Would it just disappear? The ambiguity was unsettling. I made a conscious effort to switch my main monitor view away from bin Mr. E01, forcing myself to focus on the smoothly flowing belts elsewhere. But the image of that blank green book lingered. Another hour passed. The relentless automation continued. Books flowed, arms whirred, chutes clattered. Then, amidst the mechanical symphony, I started to hear something else. Faint, intermittent, almost masked by the machinery noise. Whispers. Rule for: ignore any sounds resembling whispering coming from the empty return chutes. It's an acoustic anomaly caused by the ventilation system. I strained to listen, tilting my head. The sound was subtle, sibilant, like hushed voices just on the edge of hearing. It seemed to be coming from the bank of return chutes directly below the control booth, tall, square metal tubes where books dropped after being sorted. They were currently empty, awaiting the next wave. SSSSHHH. THHHH and SSSHHH. It didn't sound like ventilation. Air ducts usually produced a steady drone, maybe a rattle or a hum. This sounded distinctly like voices. Multiple voices, whispering indistinctly, overlapping. I couldn't make out any words, just the soft, conspiratorial hiss of speech. Acoustic anomaly. The rule tried to rationalize it. But sitting here, alone, suspended above the clattering machinery, the rationalization felt thin, unconvincing. It sounded like people were hiding in the chutes, whispering secrets in the dark. I stood up and walked to the edge of the glass booth, peering down directly at the mouths of the chutes below. They were dark, empty metal squares. The whispering seemed slightly louder here, definitely emanating from within them. SSSSHHH. Tell her, SSSHHH, soon. Did I just hear words? Tell her soon? Or was my mind just trying to find patterns in the noise? I leaned closer to the glass, heart pounding. The sound abruptly stopped. Complete silence from the chutes, leaving only the clatter of the main conveyor belt. I stayed there for a minute, listening intently. Nothing. Had I imagined it? Or had whatever was whispering known I was listening? Shaken, I retreated back to the console chair. Acoustic anomaly. Ventilation. It had to be. But the feeling of being watched, not just by cameras, but by unseen listeners hiding within the very machinery I was supposed to oversee, began to take root. The hub felt less like an efficient sorting system and more like a vast, breathing entity with secrets hidden in its metallic guts. And the night was far from over. The whispering from the chutes eventually faded, or perhaps it was just swallowed again by the constant mechanical drone of the sorting hub. I couldn't be sure. The incident left me jumpy, my ears straining to pick out any anomalous sound amidst the clatter and whir. I found myself obsessively checking the monitors, not just for system errors, but for anything out of place. Shadows that seemed too deep, movement in the periphery, the status of the lights in the forbidden Sector D, still stubbornly on. The blank green book, that INVALID_ENTRY_VOID, remained untouched in bin Mr. E01, a silent, unsettling presence on the camera feed. My attention kept snapping to the clock displayed on the main monitor. 2:45 a.m. 2:50 a.m. The next rule-bound event was approaching. Rule 3, between 3 a.m. and 3:15 a.m., the main sorting conveyor, belt alpha, will stop automatically. This is normal. Do not attempt to restart it manually. It will resume on its own after exactly 15 minutes. Stay in the control booth during this time. Belt alpha was the massive, central artery of the whole system. It ran the entire length of the main sorting floor, feeding books from the initial intake belts towards the various robotic arms and sorting chutes. Its constant, rumbling movement was the dominant sound in the hub, the baseline rhythm against which all the other clicks and words played out. The idea of it just stopping felt profoundly unnatural, like the building holding its breath. 2:58 a.m. I watched the steady flow of plastic bins moving along belt alpha below my booth. Everything appeared normal. The robotic arms pivoted and grabbed, scanners flashed red, books dropped into chutes. Relentless, efficient, inhuman. 2:59 a.m. My hands felt clammy. I leaned forward in my chair, eyes fixed on the massive conveyor belt. 3 a.m. Exactly. With a final clunk and a low groan, belt alpha shuddered to a halt. The effect was instantaneous and deeply unsettling. The loudest, most constant sound in the facility simply ceased. The abrupt silence that crashed down felt physical, pressing in on my ears. It wasn't truly silent, of course. The robotic arms froze mid-motion, their servos emitting a low electronic whine. The ventilation system still hummed, the distant drink coolers vibrated, but the absence of belt alpha's dominant roar changed the entire character of the space. It felt suddenly dead, expectant. Stay in the control booth during this time. I gripped the arms of my chair. The glass walls of the booth, which usually felt like a protective bubble, now seemed terrifyingly flimsy. The sorting floor below lay still, the bins frozen in place on the inert belt. The robotic arms were poised like metallic gargoyles, scanners dark. The sodium lamps cast long, unmoving shadows across the stationary landscape. Why did the belt stop? Automatically. The rule implied it was programmed, intentional. But why? A maintenance cycle? A system reset? Or something else? The 15-minute duration felt arbitrary, yet chillingly precise. I scanned the monitors, my gaze jumping from camera to camera. Sector D? Light still on. Bin Mr. 01? The blank green book sat undisturbed. The return chutes below? Silent, dark openings. Everything looked normal, frozen in time. But it didn't feel normal. The silence was wrong. It felt heavy, listening. I had the distinct, prickling sensation again that I was being watched, not by cameras, but by something within the silence, within the frozen machinery. Were the whispers from the chutes just waiting for the noise to die down? I risked a glance towards the darkest corners of the facility visible on the monitors, towards Sector D. Did a shadow flicker between the shelves? Or was it just my eyes playing tricks in the dim, steady light? I couldn't be sure. My eyes fell on the clock. 3:08 a.m. 7 minutes had passed. 7 more to go. The low whine of the frozen robotic arms seemed to deepen slightly. I imagined them suddenly springing to life, turning not towards the books, but towards me, their metallic claws reaching for the glass booth. I shook my head, trying to dispel the paranoid thought. It's normal. The rule said it was normal. A scheduled pause. But nothing about this place felt normal. 3:12 a.m. The silence felt absolute now. Even the ventilation seemed quieter. I strained my ears, listening for anything, a footstep, A whisper, the return of the tapping from the freezer. Nothing. Just the low electronic whine of dormant machinery and the frantic beat of my own heart. 3:14 a.m. 1 minute left. I found myself holding my breath, eyes fixed on belt alpha directly below. 3:15 a.m. Exactly. With a sudden jolt and a loud clunk rumble, belt alpha sprang back to life. The bins lurched forward, the familiar roar filled the space again, and the robotic arms resumed their precise, whirring dance. The transition was jarring, the return of the noise almost as startling as its absence had been. Within seconds, the sorting hub was back to its usual state, a vast, automated system processing an endless stream of books, the brief, unnerving pause seemingly forgotten by the machinery. But not by me. Those 15 minutes of profound silence, the feeling of being watched by the dormant system, had etched themselves into my nerves. It wasn't just a scheduled stop. It felt like the hub had taken a deliberate, measured breath. And I couldn't shake the feeling that during that pause, something unseen had taken notice of me, the lone human observer in its complex, mechanical world. The 15-minute silence of Belt Alpha echoed in my mind long after the machinery roared back to life. The brief pause had fractured the illusion of mundane automation, leaving behind a residue of watchful intelligence. I found myself scrutinizing the movements of the robotic arms, the blinking lights on the consoles, searching for any hint of deviation, any sign that the system wasn't just processing books, but aware. The blank green book remained in bin Mr. E01, ignored by the relentless machinery. The whispers from the chutes remained silent. The hours between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. were usually the quietest in terms of book intake, a lull before the first wave of morning returns hit the system. I tried to use the relative calm to focus on my textbook, highlighting passages about Byzantine trade routes with a shaky hand, but my eyes kept flicking up to the monitors, scanning the vast, empty facility. Sector D remained lit. No phantom cars appeared outside, not that there were windows to see them. No strange coins materialized. Then, around 5:15 a.m., the relative quiet was shattered by a sudden, frantic burst of activity on the belts leading to the oversized manual review section. Usually, items destined for bin Mr. E01 were infrequent, a damaged book, a magazine too flimsy for the grippers, the occasional oddity like the blank green book. But now, a steady stream of items was being diverted onto that specific belt. I leaned closer to the monitor displaying the Mr. E01 feed. They were books, but all of them were the same type, children's picture books. Brightly colored covers, large formats. One after another, the robotic arm designated for Mr. E01 grabbed them, scanned them, presumably finding them too large or perhaps encountering some other error, and dropped them unceremoniously into the bin. Clatter, clatter, clatter. It wasn't just one or two. It was dozens. Within minutes, the bottom of the large rolling bin was completely covered in a chaotic pile of picture books. Where were they all coming from? There hadn't been a corresponding surge in the main intake. It was as if the system itself was spontaneously generating children's books and routing them all to this one specific bin. My blood ran cold as I remembered the rule, the one that had seemed the most bizarre and specific. Rule 5. If a large number of children's picture books, 50 plus, are suddenly routed to the oversized manual review bin Mr. E01, for no apparent reason, lock the control booth door and do not leave it until 6 a.m. Do not look directly at the bin via the monitors if possible. 50 plus. There were easily that many already, and more were coming down the belt. For no apparent reason. This definitely qualified. Panic seized me. My hand shot out and slammed the heavy-duty lock button on the control booth door console. I heard the satisfying thunk of magnetic locks engaging. I was sealed in. Do not look directly at the bin via the monitors if possible. Why? What was wrong with looking? My eyes were glued to the monitor displaying bin Mr. E01, watching the cascade of colorful books piling higher and higher. The Very Hungry Caterpillar, Where the Wild Things Are, Goodnight Moon, Familiar, innocent covers dropping into the bin with mechanical indifference. It was absurd, nonsensical. Why would picture books be a sign of danger? I forced myself to switch the main monitor feed to a different camera angle, one showing the main belt alpha, still running normally. But like a gruesome accident on the highway, my gaze kept flicking back to the Mr. 01 feed displayed on one of the smaller, secondary screens. The pile of books was nearing the top of the bin now. Hundreds of them. The robotic arm continued its work, relentlessly adding more. Then, I saw it. Or rather, I thought I saw it. Amidst the jumble of bright covers, deep within the pile, did something move. A flicker of motion, too quick to be sure. Was it just books settling? Or was something underneath the pile, disturbed by the constant influx? I leaned closer, squinting at the secondary screen, heart pounding. The image resolution wasn't great, slightly grainy under the sodium lights. I couldn't be certain, but the possibility made my skin crawl. Do not look. With a shudder, I reached out and physically turned off the secondary monitor displaying bin Mr. E01. The screen went black. Better. Safer? But now the not knowing felt worse. What was happening in that bin? Why the specific warning about children's books? What did they represent? Or hide? The main sorting floor continued its automated operations outside my locked booth. Books flowed, arms whirred. But the sound seemed different now, menacing. And the silence from bin Mr. 01 felt loud, accusatory. I checked the clock. 5:35 a.m. 25 minutes until 6 a.m., when the rule said I could leave the booth. 25 minutes locked in this glass cage, knowing something deeply wrong was happening just outside, centered around a bin overflowing with seemingly innocent picture books. The rhythmic hum of the machinery no longer felt like background noise, it felt like the purring of a predator, waiting patiently just outside my door. The control booth, once my elevated sanctuary from the noise, now felt like a glass cage. Outside, the sorting hub churned on, indifferent to my plight. Belt alpha rumbled, robotic arms pivoted, books clattered down chutes, everything operated with its usual relentless efficiency, except for the silent, unnerving zone around bin Mr. E01. I had turned off the monitor feed for that bin, obeying Rule 5, but the knowledge of what was happening, or might be happening, within that overflowing cart of children's books just feet below me was a constant, gnawing pressure. Lock the control booth door and do not leave it until 6 a.m. I checked the clock again. 5:40 a.m. 20 minutes left. The magnetic locks on the booth door hummed faintly, a low electronic thrum that was usually reassuring but now felt like the only thing keeping something out. Why the picture books? The question hammered at me. Were they significant? Or were they just a delivery system? A camouflage? What could be hiding under a pile of Goodnight Moon and Pat the Bunny? The incongruity was almost laughable, yet utterly terrifying. My ears strained, trying to pick out any unusual sound over the din of the machinery. Had the whispering from the chutes returned? Was there any noise coming from bin Mr. 01 itself? A rustling? A shifting? I couldn't tell. The overall noise level of the hub effectively masked any subtle sounds, especially from the floor below. Then, a new sound began, faint but distinct, cutting through the mechanical rhythm. Tapping. Not from the ice freezer this time, but from underneath the control booth floor. Tap, 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 tap. It sounded like small fingers drumming lightly against the metal underside of the elevated booth. My blood ran cold. Was it coming from bin Mr. 01? Had something climbed out? Or was it something else entirely, drawn by the anomaly? I froze, listening. The tapping was intermittent, almost playful, yet carried an undercurrent of menace. Tap, 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 tap. It moved slightly, seeming to travel along the underside of the booth, directly beneath my feet. My eyes darted to the small gap where the control cables ran down from the console through the floor. Could something come up through there? The opening was small, maybe only 6 inches square, packed with thick wires. Unlikely. But down here, unlikely felt like a flimsy shield. The tapping stopped. I waited, holding my breath. A full minute passed. Silence, save for the usual hub noises. Had it gone? Then, something scraped against the glass wall of the booth, right behind my chair. I yelped, spinning around so fast the chair almost tipped over. There was nothing there. Just the vast, dimly lit sorting floor stretching out beyond the glass. But the sound had been unmistakable, like rough material, or perhaps fingernails, dragging across the exterior of the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Now on the glass, right next to my head. I scrambled away from the console, pressing myself against the opposite wall of the booth, eyes wide with terror. I couldn't see anything out there, but something was touching the booth, interacting with it. Was it invisible? Or just staying out of the direct line of sight from the internal cameras I couldn't access? The tapping moved along the glass wall, slow, deliberate, tapping out an irregular rhythm. It felt like it was testing the barrier, probing for a way in. My gaze flickered to the clock. 5:52 a.m. 8 minutes. The tapping stopped again. Silence. Then, a soft, childish giggle seemed to echo faintly through the glass. It wasn't menacing, just inappropriate. Out of place. Deeply unsettling. I stayed plastered against the far wall, barely breathing, watching the second hand sweep around my cheap wristwatch. Longest minutes of my life. The giggle didn't return. No more tapping, no more scraping. Just the relentless noise of the sorting machinery outside. 5:58 a.m. 5:59 a.m. My muscles were coiled tight, ready to spring the moment the clock hit 6 o'clock. Bing! The digital clock on the console flipped to 6 a.m. Rule 5, do not leave it until 6 a.m. Cautiously, I reached out and hit the button to disengage the magnetic door locks. The faint hum ceased. I waited a moment, listening. Nothing. Slowly, heart pounding, I pushed the booth door open and peered out. The main sorting floor looked exactly as it always did at this time. Belt alpha running, arms sorting, chutes clattering. My gaze immediately went to bin Mr. 01. From my elevated position, I could see it. The overflow of children's picture books was gone. Not just moved, but gone. The bin was now only about a quarter full, containing a random assortment of genuinely oversized or damaged books, exactly as it should on a normal night. There was no sign of the massive, inexplicable influx. No sign of whatever might have been moving within the pile. It was as if the whole incident hadn't happened. Except it had. The memory of the tapping, the scraping on the glass, the disembodied giggle, was all too real. Shaking, I gathered my bag, grabbed the logbook, and practically ran down the spiral stairs, eager to get out into the morning light. As I passed the now quiet return chutes, I couldn't help but glance into their dark openings, half expecting to hear one final whisper. Silence. I hurried towards the exit, passing Sector D, lights still on, looking perfectly normal, and punched the button to open the large roll-up door that led to the employee parking lot. Fresh, cold morning air flooded in, smelling blessedly normal. Just as I stepped over the threshold, ready to escape, my foot kicked something small that had been left just inside the door. I looked down. It was a single, slightly worn children's picture book. Where the Wild Things Are. Lying open. To a page depicting the horned, clawed monsters dancing under a full moon. I didn't pick it up. I ran to my car, got in, locked the doors, and didn't look back until the sterile beige cube of the sorting hub was far behind me in my rearview mirror. Whatever game this place was playing, the rules felt increasingly inadequate, and the stakes felt terrifyingly high. Leaving the sorting hub after the picture book incident felt like escaping a fever dream. The normalcy of the drive home, the rising sun, the other commuters, the familiar streets, seemed jarringly out of place compared to the automated, whispering, tapping world I'd just left behind. The image of where the wild things are lying open by the door haunted me. Was it a message? A warning? A remnant left behind by whatever had caused the book flood? I spent the day in a haze of exhaustion and dread. Sleep was fitful, filled with images of overflowing bins and childish giggles echoing in the dark. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty space where bin Mr. 01 should have been on the monitor, a blind spot that felt more threatening than seeing the anomaly itself. Filing the official log report felt absurdly inadequate. 5:15 a.m. approx. 5:50 a.m. System routed excessive number of children's books to Mr. E01. Followed Protocol 5. Bin contents appeared normal at 6 a.m. No mention of tapping, scraping, giggling, or the book left by the door. How could I report that? Reluctantly, I returned for my next shift that night, armed with caffeine and a heavy sense of foreboding. The hub greeted me with its usual indifferent roar of machinery. The control booth felt tainted now, less like a refuge and more like a barely fortified outpost. The first thing I did was check bin Mr. E01 on the monitors. It looked completely normal, holding only a couple of genuinely oversized art books. Sector DS lights were on. The air smelled only of dust and electricity. Maybe it wouldn't happen again? The first few hours were tense but uneventful. I performed my monitoring duties mechanically, my ears constantly straining for whispers, my eyes flicking nervously towards the Mr. 01 camera feed and the Sector D lights. The blank green book from the previous night was gone from the bin, presumably rerouted by the system as Rule 2 promised, though I'd never seen any mechanism interact with it. Then, shortly after 2 a.m., the emergency phone rang. It wasn't a normal ring. It was a single, piercing electronic shriek, like an old-fashioned modem trying to connect, followed by silence. My entire body went rigid. Rule 6, the emergency phone in the booth calls 911 and Mr. Henderson. If you receive an incoming call on it, it should not be able to, do not answer. Unplug the phone line from the wall immediately. It should not be able to. The phone, a simple red handset hardwired into the console, wasn't supposed to receive calls. It was an outgoing line only. Yet, it had just made a sound indicating an incoming connection attempt. I stared at the red phone, frozen. Had it actually rung? Or was it just another electronic glitch in this perpetually malfunctioning building? It shrieked again, "SKIE," louder this time, making me jump. Then silence. Unplug the phone line from the wall immediately. My hands trembled as I fumbled under the console, tracing the thick grey phone cord back to where it plugged into a jack on the wall near the floor. The connection looked old, slightly corroded. Scree! A third time, even louder, more sustained, making the plastic casing of the phone vibrate. With a surge of panic, I yanked the cord. The plug came free from the wall jack with a small pop. The shrieking stopped instantly. Silence descended, broken only by the usual hum and clatter of the sorting machinery below. I held the unplugged phone cord in my hand, staring at it as if it were a snake. What had been trying to call? And why was it so critical to unplug it? What happened if you did answer? My gaze drifted to the monitors. Everything looked normal. Belt Alpha rumbled on. Robotic arms sorted books with tireless precision. But the brief, piercing electronic shriek felt like a violation, another crack in the fragile wall separating the hub's automated routine from whatever unseen forces pulsed beneath its surface. I tucked the useless phone cord back under the console, leaving it unplugged. Mr. Henderson would probably ask about it in the morning, but explaining why I'd unplugged the emergency line felt impossible. Rule 6 said to? He'd think I was losing it, just like Kevin presumably had. As I sat back down, trying to calm my racing heart, I noticed something on the main monitor's system log, a new entry that hadn't been there before, time-stamped precisely during the third electronic shriek. SYS_alert, external_connection_attempt, source_unknown, -line_emergency. Protocol_6_active. Disconnect_immediate. Failure_TO_comply equals cascading_system_error_imminent. Cascading system error imminent. Failure to unplug the phone wouldn't just be breaking a rule, it would apparently risk bringing the entire multi-million-dollar sorting system crashing down. Or was the system error a euphemism for something else entirely? The rest of the hour passed without incident, but the unplugged emergency phone felt like a dead weight on the console, a symbol of my increasing isolation and the escalating weirdness of the sorting hub. The rules weren't just suggestions anymore, they felt like active countermeasures against a system, or an entity, that was constantly probing, testing, looking for a way in. And I was the sole, unprepared human operator caught in the middle. Okay, here is part 7 of the sorting hub story. Part 7, Sector D. The unplugged emergency phone sat on the console like a dead thing, a stark reminder of the previous night's violation. I couldn't shake the feeling that by simply receiving that impossible call, even without answering, some boundary had been tested, some awareness shifted. The usual mechanical roar of the sorting hub felt different now, charged with a subtle, watchful tension. I kept a close eye on the clock as 3 a.m. approached. The memory of Belt Alpha's 15-minute pause, the heavy silence, the feeling of being observed by the dormant machinery, was still fresh, and I dreaded its recurrence. Rule 3, between 3 a.m. and 3:15 a.m., the main sorting conveyor, Belt Alpha, will stop automatically. Stay in the control booth during this time. At 2:59 a.m., I made sure the booth door was locked, dimmed the internal booth light slightly, though there was no rule for this, it felt instinctively safer, and fixed my gaze on the main conveyor below. 3 a.m. Exactly. As before, Belt Alpha shuddered to a halt with a low groan. The dominant sound of the hub vanished, replaced by that heavy, expectant silence, punctuated only by the low whine of the now frozen robotic arms and the hum of the ventilation. The 15-minute countdown began. This time, the silence felt even more profound, more deliberate. I scanned the monitors, my gaze jumping from camera to camera. Bin Mr. E01 remained normal, holding only a few genuinely oversized items. The return chutes below were dark and silent. Then my eyes landed on the monitors for Sector D, the far back corner, shelving units 80 to 99. Rule 1. Keep the main overhead lights on at all times. If Sector DS lights go out, do not go back there to investigate. Report it in the morning log. Avoid that sector until daylight. The lights in Sector D were off. Not flickering, not dimmed, completely extinguished. The camera feeds from that section showed only pitch blackness, vast and absolute, where rows of shelves should have been visible under the usual sodium lamps. It was like looking into a void that had swallowed a corner of the facility whole. My breath hitched. When had they gone out? Had they been off all night, and I hadn't noticed? Or did they extinguish the moment Belt Alpha stopped? The rule explicitly forbade investigation, but the sudden, total darkness in that specific sector, coinciding exactly with the system's scheduled pause, felt deeply wrong. Stay in the control booth. The rule was clear. But my eyes were glued to the black rectangles on the monitor bank representing Sector D. Was something happening back there during the pause? Was that why the belt stopped? To allow something unseen to move, unhindered, unobserved, in the darkness? The silence in the hub seemed to deepen. I strained my ears, listening for any sound from the darkened sector, movement, whispers, scraping. Nothing. Just the oppressive weight of the silence itself. I thought about the previous operator, Kevin. What had he seen? What had made him leave so suddenly? Had he broken Rule 1? Had he ventured back into Sector D when the lights went out? The clock ticked over to 3:08 a.m. Still 7 minutes until Belt Alpha restarted. 7 minutes of sitting here, knowing a whole section of the facility behind me had gone dark, possibly filled with what? Suddenly, one of the black Sector D monitors flickered. Not back to light, but showing a momentary burst of static, like interference. Then, another monitor, displaying a different angle of the same darkened sector, did the same. Static flared, then vanished, returning the screen to black. My skin crawled. It felt like something back there was moving, something that disrupted the camera feeds as it passed. Invisible, perhaps, but substantial enough to cause electronic interference. Do not go back there. The rule felt less like a procedural note and more like a desperate, vital warning. My gaze flickered to the main floor below. Everything remained frozen, static. The inert robotic arms seemed like patient watchers. The silence felt thick, suffocating. 3:13 a.m. 2 minutes left. The static bursts on the Sector D monitors became more frequent, jumping randomly between the different camera angles covering that area. It was like trying to watch a thunderstorm through faulty equipment, brief flashes illuminating nothing but the subsequent darkness. 3:14 a.m. 1 minute. The static intensified, multiple Sector D screens flickering simultaneously. A low humming sound, different from the basement hum at the observatory, seemed to emanate from the speakers connected to the monitor bank, a deep, resonant frequency that vibrated through the console, through my chair, into my bones. 3:15 a.m. Exactly. With its usual jarring clunk rumble, Belt Alpha jolted back to life. The roar of the machinery filled the space once more. The robotic arms resumed their tasks. The hub snapped back into its automated routine. And on the monitor bank, the lights in Sector D were back on. All camera feeds showed the familiar rows of shelves, the empty concrete floor, brightly lit under the sodium lamps. No sign of disturbance. No explanation for the darkness or the static. It looked completely, utterly normal. Except it wasn't. Because I knew, with chilling certainty, that for 15 minutes, that entire sector had been plunged into darkness while something moved unseen within it. The scheduled pause wasn't just a system reset. It was an opportunity. A window. And whatever lurked in Sector D used it. The hub wasn't just sorting books, it was providing cover for something else entirely. The return of the lights in Sector D did little to ease my mounting dread. Knowing that the darkness had been deliberate, coinciding perfectly with Belt Alpha's pause, transformed the hub in my mind. It wasn't just a potentially haunted building, it felt like a malfunctioning machine deliberately creating blind spots, providing 15 minutes of cover each night for something that operated outside its own automated logic. What moved in that darkness? And why only then? I spent the next hour compulsively checking the Sector D camera feeds. They remained resolutely normal, brightly lit, empty aisles, stationary shelves. Yet, the blackness I'd witnessed felt more real now than the mundane images on the screen. It was like knowing a predator was lurking just outside your tent, even when you couldn't see it. The knowledge changed everything. My gaze kept flicking to the feed for bin Mr. 01. Still normal, holding a few discarded magazines and a large print atlas. The blank green book, the first of INVALID_ENTRY_VOID, was gone, presumably rerouted unseen, as Rule 2 vaguely promised. Its disappearance was almost as unsettling as its appearance. Then, around 4:30 a.m., another alert flashed on the console, identical to the one from the previous night. Manual review required, bin Mr. E01. My stomach clenched. I switched the main monitor to the Mr. E01 camera feed. Below, one of the robotic arms pivoted, extended its gripper, and dropped a single book into the bin. It wasn't green this time. This book had a plain, unmarked cover of deep, hellebore red. No title, no spine text, no barcode visible. I quickly checked the sorting log for the arm. Timestamp for hours 31 minutes and 52 seconds. Item ID, null. Barcode scan, INVALID_ENTRY_VOID. Route, Mr. E01. Another one. My breath hitched. Where were these coming from? They weren't appearing on the intake belts. It was as if the system itself was spontaneously generating them, like error messages taking physical form. Rule 2 again, leave it. Do not remove it. Do not attempt to read it. I stared at the red book sitting starkly against the grey plastic bottom of the bin. Unlike the green book, this one seemed different. Was it my imagination, fueled by lack of sleep and escalating fear, or did the red cover seem to pulse, very faintly, with a light that wasn't quite reflected, but emanated from within? A slow, subtle throb, like embers cooling. Do not look directly at the bin via the monitors if possible, Rule 5 had warned regarding the picture book flood. Did that apply here too? Rule 2 only said not to read it. I kept watching, mesmerized, unable to tear my eyes away from the faint, possibly imagined, pulse of the red book cover. It felt magnetic, drawing my attention, whispering promises of forbidden knowledge just like the phantom lavender had offered comfort. Suddenly, a low hum started, cutting through the usual clatter of the hub. It wasn't the machinery, this was different. Higher-pitched, resonant, almost electrical. It seemed to be coming from the console itself. My eyes darted to the emergency phone, the red handset, still unplugged, its grey cord lying limply beside the dead wall jack. The humming was coming from the phone. Impossible. It had no power. I'd physically disconnected it. Yet, the plastic casing was vibrating faintly, emitting a low, steady, resonant hum that seemed to thrum in my teeth. I scrambled back in my chair, putting distance between myself and the console. An unplugged phone shouldn't make noise. It shouldn't vibrate. Was it reacting to the book? Or was this a separate event, another layer of the hub's nightly performance? The humming continued for perhaps 30 seconds, a clear, unwavering electronic tone. Then, as abruptly as it started, it stopped. The phone fell silent again, just an inert piece of plastic on the console. I stared at it, then back at the monitor showing bin Mr. 01. The red book lay still. The faint pulsing seemed to have stopped, though I couldn't be sure if it had ever really been there. My hands were shaking again. The unplugged phone humming, it felt like a direct violation of basic physics, far more unsettling than the whispers or phantom lights. It suggested the forces at play here operated on rules far stranger than simple haunting. I checked the clock. 6:40 a.m. Almost time to leave. I felt an overwhelming urge to flee, to not even wait for the official end of my shift. But the thought of leaving that red book sitting there, unexplained, potent, felt dangerous too. As I began gathering my few belongings, my half-read textbook, my empty thermos, I kept the Mr. 01 feed displayed prominently on the main screen. I needed to know if the red book would disappear like the green one had. 6:55 a.m. Still there. 6:58 a.m. Still there. At 7 a.m. sharp, the large roll-up door at the main entrance began to rumble open automatically, signaling the end of the night shift lockdown and the imminent arrival of the day crew, including Mr. Henderson. Just as the door reached its fully open position, letting in the grey morning light, the red book on the monitor vanished. Not picked up by an arm, not obscured by shadow, one frame it was there, the next the bin was empty save for the legitimate oversized items. Gone. Instantly. Without a trace. No log entry, no system alert. Just erased. I didn't wait for Henderson. I grabbed my bag, practically vaulted down the spiral stairs, and bolted out the now open main door into the blessedly normal, if slightly grimy, morning air. The unplugged phone, the book that pulsed, the lights going out in Sector D, the anomalies were escalating, becoming bolder, more direct. And the rules, my only flimsy protection, felt increasingly like trying to hold back the tide with a sieve. Something was building, and I had the horrible feeling that the approaching blue moon wasn't just a deadline for the dead, but for me too. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, parked at the far edge of the employee lot. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the key into the ignition. As the engine sputtered to life, I glanced back at the monolithic beige building. The large roll-up door stood open like a vacant mouth, darkness still clinging within despite the grey morning light. It looked utterly ordinary, just a warehouse. But the memory of the humming unplugged phone and the vanishing red book scraped against my sanity. Mr. Henderson's sedan pulled into the lot just as I was about to reverse. He parked beside me, looking even more flustered than usual, juggling a briefcase, a steaming coffee cup, and a half-eaten donut. He peered at me through my open window, his brow furrowed with concern. "Sarah? You all right? Leaving a bit sharp this morning, aren't we?" he asked, dusting powdered sugar from his tie. I couldn't hold it back. The words tumbled out in a rush, fueled by fear and lack of sleep. "Mr. Henderson, something's wrong in there. Really wrong." The lights in Sector D went out during the 3 a.m. stop. A book showed up in the manual bin, bright red, no barcode, maybe glowing? Then the emergency phone, the unplugged one, it started humming. And the book just vanished right at 7 a.m. Henderson listened, his expression shifting from mild concern to a familiar, weary resignation. He sighed heavily, the sound rattling in his chest. Ah. The red one. That hasn't shown up in, well, quite a while. He avoided my eyes, staring instead at the hub building. Thought maybe that had stopped. Stopped? What is it? What's going on in Sector D? Why does the belt stop? What was trying to call me? The questions poured out. He held up a hand, stopping my frantic interrogation. Sarah, calm down. It's the hub. It's an old system, networked into even older city infrastructure. Glitches happen. Strange signals get crossed. Acoustic anomalies. He recited the rationalizations, but his voice lacked conviction. He sounded like someone trying to convince himself as much as me. That wasn't a glitch, Mr. Henderson, I insisted, leaning out the window. That phone had no power. And the lights in D, the timing with the belt stopping, and the picture books last night. Kevin's list, it's all real, isn't it? Henderson looked around the empty parking lot, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. Look, Sarah. This place, it's got history. More than most people know. Built on old land, near the railyard, things echo. He swallowed hard. Kevin, the guy before you, he got too interested. Started poking around where he shouldn't. Didn't stick to the protocols. That's why he left suddenly. The implication hung heavy in the air. So the rules are real. I pressed. They're not just quirks. They're important, he said evasively. Crucial. Follow them, exactly, and you'll be fine. Report what you see in the log, don't investigate, don't deviate. That's the job. Can you do that? I looked back at the base building. The open door seemed like a dark maw, waiting to swallow the unwary. I thought about the whispers, the tapping, the impossible star at the observatory, the feeling of being watched by the machinery itself. Could I just ignore it all? Follow the rules, collect the paycheck, and pretend the humming phone and vanishing books weren't happening? I don't know, I said honestly, the words feeling heavy. I don't think I can. Henderson nodded slowly, a deep sadness in his eyes. Didn't think so. Kevin couldn't either, in the end. Some people just notice things more. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. Here's your pay for the week. And a bit extra, for inconvenience. He placed the envelope on my passenger seat. No hard feelings. Call it severance. Probably best if you just move on. Forget about this place. Some doors are better left unopened. He started to walk away, then paused, turning back one last time. Just one piece of advice. Don't try looking for Kevin. Or the guy before him. They didn't find the something else. They just stopped clocking in. He walked towards the hub entrance, disappearing into the building's shadow without looking back. I sat in my car for a long time, the envelope heavy on the seat beside me. Move on. Forget. It sounded easy. But the images were burned into my mind, the blank green book, the pulsing red book, the black void of Sector D, the wild things dancing on the page left open by the door. Could I forget? Should I? I started the car. Instead of driving home, I found myself pulling out onto the main road, heading towards the County Central Library's main branch downtown. I didn't know what I was looking for. Old building plans? Newspaper archives? Records of previous night operators who stopped clocking in? Maybe Henderson was right. Maybe some doors were better left unopened. But maybe, just maybe, understanding what lurked behind them was the only way to make sure they stayed closed. The rules had kept me safe, for now. But they hadn't provided answers. And the questions left behind by the humming phone and the vanishing books felt like loose threads, begging to be pulled.